You know, I approach people all the time about being on my hangout, and they'll say, well, John, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a coach, or I'm a consultant. That's not a career. Yes, it is. World's changed so fantastically and so amazingly positive in the last 10 to 15 years, where for the longest time, most of us worked in an environment where we got up in the morning, afternoon, or evening and went to a designated place of work and worked there for a designated amount of time. And then we went home. But today, and I think mostly through the marvels and the amazing capabilities of the internet, there are so many careers available to us today. And because of that, that's why I created the Career Corner. And that's why I have my special guest today, Julie Stiles. Now, this is the Career Corner, and I'm John Jerkowitz, career development consultant and coach, small business guru. The only thing I can't do is grow hair on the top of my head, but one day I'll figure out a way to do that. Julie, welcome.
Thank you so much, John. It's great to be here today.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you for asking. I would be happy to do that. I am a health and transformation coach and do some different energy healing modalities as well. And, really my whole journey has come to this point because of my own experience with my body and my health. So, we can go into that if you'd like, but I actually have a really varied background. I've been everything from a high school teacher. I've worked in asbestos removal. I've worked in, the coaching, obviously. I've also been a writer and worked in educational technology for a few years. So, I've kind of been all over the place and done a lot of different and really interesting things, and really happy to be here today.
So, as a health and transformation coach, could you tell us a little bit, what do you do? How do you approach? Because I think I shared with you in an email yesterday, I was at a live networking event, and there were at least 7 people who came up to me and said, John, if you buy my supplement, you'll be healthier than you've ever been. Okay. And, you listen politely and everything else. And I sat back and I thought, okay, here's 7 people with 7 different approaches to make me healthy. What's your approach?
That's a great question. Yeah. So as a coach, I mean, you know about coaching because you're a coach. As a coach, my job is really to help people know what they already know, to help people be able to tap into their own wisdom and their own knowing and be healthy from that place. So as a health coach, there is, I'm trained in a particular, I was trained at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition in New York. And that we were trained in a particular 6-month, program that did have a lot of educational component to it. And at the same time, I'm very much more into kind of more traditional coaching, which is very intuitive and very much helping people, just get to the point where you really are able to take back the power over your own health and well-being. So rather than listening to all of these other, listening to all those people who are telling you about their supplement and how great it's going to be, that you can actually listen to yourself and you can know for yourself whether that supplement or whether changing your diet or whether exercising more or whatever it is going to help you improve, improve your health and well-being.
Tell me a little bit. And by the way, Julie's written what I think are 2 really good books, because my wife and I both read them over the weekend. And I put links to her website on the event page. And if you want to go there, you can, if you subscribe to her newsletter, you can get a free download of each one of those. She actually has 2 websites. And I tell you what, my hat's off to you. I got a hard time managing one, much less 2. Okay. But tell us why you wrote Reclaim Your Wellbeing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So Reclaim Your Wellbeing, I wrote for the podcast website, which my podcast is called Autoimmune Adventures. And, I wrote that book because I was really, so part of my own journey has been around my own health has been, I've had chronic illness for my entire life. I mean, I was diagnosed with asthma when I was 18 months old. And when I was diagnosed with asthma, I kind of went through the typical medical system, Western medical system, and that paradigm. And I really bought into it. I mean, that's what I grew up in, basically. And that paradigm is very much about, okay, you have this chronic illness. There's not really a fix for it. You have to manage it. You kind of have to manage your condition in your body. And it's all through, of course, drugs, which, I kind of, when I was in high school and college, I kind of started to get out of that a little bit and be like, is that really true? And are there other possibilities here? And so I was looking into alternative medicine, but I was still pretty much in that paradigm of, I don't really have the power over my own health and well-being. And then 13 years ago, I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. And when that happened, it really kind of kicked the whole thing up a notch, because I felt really betrayed at that point by my body. I was like, here, I've done all this research into alternative medicine, and I've already lived with chronic illness, and I've changed my diet a bunch of times, and now I still, I have this other chronic illness that I've been diagnosed with. And so at that point, I really had to shift a lot of things. I had to shift how I was looking at myself. I had to shift how I was looking at my body, and I had to really shift that kind of getting out of that whole paradigm of who has the power over my health and well-being. Because I wasn't willing to live in that same thing anymore, where it's like, okay, now I just have to go to the doctor and give up my power to the doctor. And that's all I can really do. And so my part of my journey has very much been about what are all of the points of power that I have to impact my own health and well-being. And starting to really see the hundreds and hundreds of choices that we all make every single day that actually do impact our health. And being able to be more conscious, because a lot of time we're run by habit with those. We just sort of do them because we've always done them. And how much can we get out of that habit and be really conscious about the choices that we're making, and be conscious about how those choices are really impacting our health. And so Reclaim Your Well-Being is basically kind of diving into that. It's really looking at what are some of those points of power that we have, and how can we begin to understand how they impact our health, and then learn how to take back some of that power and make different choices in our life, so that we actually are impacting our own well-being and aren't so reliant on, say, giving over the power to the doctor, or just wanting the quick fix, or the supplement, or the pill, or the medicine that's going to, kind of handle and take care of whatever's going on.
I want to go back a little bit to something you said in the beginning of that explanation, when you talked about the frustration of dealing with an autoimmune disorder, or the frustration of those of us who might have a chronic disorder, okay? That frustration often leads to depression, and I'm talking from personal experience. What kind of advice can you give us? Real quickly, I was a runner for a number of years, and I hurt my back, and it severely limited my ability to run. And, you talked about Western medicine and everything else, and I was told there was nothing wrong with me. Well, oh, really? I can't move. You get depressed. So if I'm a client of yours, what are some tips or techniques you give people to deal with that frustration and depression?
That's a great question, and I absolutely can relate to what you say, because depression has definitely been a part of my journey as well, and particularly after I was diagnosed. And a lot of times that actually, well, there's a number of different kind of responses that I can give to that, and it really depends on the client what I would actually say. But some of the things are just that, first, especially if you're chronic, which a lot of chronic illnesses are related to inflammation in the body. And there's actually now a growing amount of research that says that depression is also highly related to inflammation in the body. So the first thing is just to understand that, a lot of the time we think, I think still in this culture, there's this kind of stigma around anything mental. It's like, oh, well, depression, and that's sort of something, it has a different level of something wrong with you, that you have depression, you're depressed. And so the first thing I think to really understand is that, there's often a real a physiological basis to some of these things. I mean, depression, of course, can also be a chemical imbalance in the brain. So that's the first thing to understand. It's not, there isn't something fundamentally wrong with you because you're depressed. And things like sleep really play into this too. Because if you're not getting enough sleep because you're in pain, or because of whatever's going on in your body, inflammation, then that can also, create more, or increase the likelihood that you'll be experiencing something like depression. So that's the first thing. And then, other than that, it's really kind of what I've been already talking about. It's like, as you start to take back your power, because a lot of what depression can be about is about that sense of hopelessness, that we can't do anything to impact what's going on. And that's definitely where I was for a long time. But as you begin to make these little changes, just these tiny little things that you can shift in your life, that can begin to also shift you out of that depression, because you're actually taking action, and then you're seeing how that action can impact your well-being. And that can also start to get you out of that place. And then there's, of course, a lot of techniques. There's like mindfulness that you can, these other techniques that are very helpful for conditions like depression. I mean, there's mindfulness-based, cognitive therapy is a huge thing with depression right now, and it's very, very successful with people with a certain, not, the most extreme cases of depression, but sort of mild to moderate depression. It's extremely helpful, and there's a lot of books out there that you can get to learn kind of that mindfulness-based cognitive approach to dealing with depression.
Well, I'm going to tell you that if you guys watching, and again, in the event page, and those of you watching on YouTube, it's going to be shared there. If you get an opportunity, check out Julie's web pages, and by all means read both books, because I'm going to tell you there's a line from the Bible that says there's nothing new under the sun. But I think when you go back and you look at just some of the common sense stuff that you share there, I was really lifted up by it in reading it. Okay, so now you work with people both live and in person, and you work with people online, right? Okay. Yep. You have to say yes. The camera doesn't. The camera doesn't understand nods. Okay. All right. So you work with people both live and in person. So now I come to you as an internet client, and I say, Julie, and I'm going to get to the checklist in one of your books here in a little bit. Okay. But I did it and almost immediately got depressed, which I don't think that's what it was supposed to do, but it was a good thing. So I come to you and I say, hey, Julie, I've heard you've had some success with a lot of people, and walk me through what you do with a new client.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, it's very different, obviously, for each person. And if somebody's coming to me really with something specifically around their health, because I've definitely worked with people more around just general life stuff. But if somebody's coming to me around their health in particular and health issues, then the first thing I actually do is I have them fill out a health history form, which really looks at kind of the whole picture of their health, their history, their family's history, and kind of where they are in their life right now, what their concerns are, what their challenges are, what they would like to change about their health. And so the whole first session, including, what they're eating, things like that. And so the whole first session with somebody is really looking at where are you with your health right now and where would you like to be? And then that kind of gives it sort of sets the foundation really for what I work with people on, because then it kind of gives us the roadmap of, okay, so what do we do to begin, moving that person towards where they want to be in their life?
Okay. In 2008, a lot of people who had planned on retiring very soon suddenly had that event either delayed or completely canceled when we went through, whether you call it a recession, depression, a hiccup, a bump in the road, call it what you may. And so my generation, the baby boomers, and I'm 61 and a half years old. I know I don't look it. We're having to work much longer than we did, and some of us may never retire. Some of us are going to work well into our 70s. So if I'm a person that comes to you and says, hey, Julie, I'm 61 and a half years old, and the way it looks like it may be age 70 before I even start to think about retirement, what kind of advice would you have for me?
That's a great question. And I have worked with people in their 60s and 70s, so this is very apropos. And I totally agree with you. And I think the first thing to start with is just, is what you're doing, do you enjoy it? And if you don't, how can you? Either how can you shift to something where you really are enjoying what you're doing, or how can you just bring more fun and enjoyment into whatever it is that you are doing? Because it's so important. It's like to really go through our day enjoying what we're doing. I mean, that's like key. And then the other thing is just how much self-care do you really have in your life? Like, yes, you may still have to work. Your body is older than it was when you were 20. And, so it's going to have different needs. And so are you really paying attention to it? Are you really taking care of it the way it needs you to take care of it right now? And that's the other thing to really look at, is what might you need to shift, incorporate into your life to be able to kind of keep up the work aspect, but also make sure that your health is, because it's like, as you get older, you really, health is always important. I mean, to me, health is foundational. It's like the #1 primary asset that we have in our life. And if you've ever experienced being sick or getting a chronic illness or whatever, you know how true that is. It's like a lot of times when we're well, we tend to kind of discount how that asset and the importance of kind of investing our time and our money into the asset of our health. And as people get older, I think it becomes more obvious to them that that really is a primary asset. And so it's really important to look at how much you're willing and able to invest into that. And even if there's so many small little ways that we can do that throughout the day, if I'm not talking about like, oh, you have to take like half your day to do self-care. It's just how many little ways can you really incorporate caring for yourself and your body into your life every day?
Well, you're doing a mind morph here, because you're leading me right into my next question. And, in Reclaim Your Wellbeing, you talk about a lot of different things you can do. And there's two I want to focus on just for a few minutes and have you talk about. And one, you talked about the importance of breathing. Okay. And the other thing you talked about was the importance of movement. Okay. Could you share with us why you feel those two things are so important?
Yeah, absolutely. There's any number of reasons why those are both really important. So I think just to start on kind of the biggest level is just how much are most of us really out of touch with our body for most of the day. If you think about it, a lot of us kind of pay attention to our body when it hurts. We pay attention to our body when we go exercise. We pay attention to our body maybe when we're eating, but often people are like eating in front of the computer, in front of the TV, or they're talking to other people while they're eating. So there's this huge portion of time that for most of us, we're not even kind of present with this amazing, miraculous thing that's carrying us through this world, our body. And so the first level of answering this question is just that breath and movement can both tap you back into really being present with your body. So if you take a really deep breath, and you can just do this right now as you're listening, just take a deep breath, or just move a little bit, like however your body wants to move, just move a little bit. It's like it just gets you back into awareness of where your body is and what's happening with it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that both breath and movement have really significant impacts on our health and well-being. I mean, most of us breathe in a really shallow way. That's often, either just breathing in the upper part of the chest, or maybe we're breathing low in the belly, but we're not breathing in the upper part of the chest. So we're not kind of taking the full breath, because you can actually, if you really take a full breath, like you can feel it everywhere. You can feel it down low in your belly. You can feel it in the mid part. You can feel it in your upper chest. Your shoulders go up, your sides go out. You can feel it in the back if you're really taking a full breath. So it's like, that's really a full breath. And when you do that, it's like you're just filling your body with so much more energy and so much more oxygen than you are if you're just kind of breathing in this shallow sort of way. So even if you just do that, set a timer on your phone and take a deep breath every 15 minutes, like even that, you would probably notice a shift in your energy. And then movement, similarly, one of the things that, there's a lot out there now about how bad sitting is for you, like sitting for long periods of time, which how many of us do that all day, right? I mean, I'm doing it. I'm sitting in front of my computer for most of the day. And, when I first heard this, I was like, okay, so and I actually just, my little coffee break moment for Karen's coffee house chatter is on this topic. So watch for that. I'm not sure when it's going to come out, but watch for that to come out because it's on this topic. So when I first heard that, oh, sitting's bad for you, I was like, okay, I'll stand, so I started to stand up while I worked. Well, then I found out that it's actually just as bad for you to stand for long periods of time. And so the key, it turns out, is movement and shifting your relationship to gravity. So when you movement, so one of the things with movement is that is that your lymph system only moves through movement. So, the blood circulation in our body, which is, obviously one of the circulations in our body is blood, and that's moved by our heart pumping. But the lymph system, which is, basically a lot of our immune system is the lymph system, there's nothing pumping that. So basically that only gets moved when you move your body. Like every time you move your body, you sort of squish your lymph and it moves things around in your body. And that's moving all of that, that's the immune system. It's moving out all of the stuff that, your immune system has said, oh, that's not me, it's foreign, so I need to get rid of it. That's moving all of that. So that's a really important job. And the shifting the relationship with gravity, they've actually done studies with astronauts on this, that it's actually what's really important to the body is that that you're not just sitting, you're not just standing, you're not just lying down, that you're actually shifting that relationship all of the time. When they do studies of people who live to be over 100 octogenarians, what they find is that they're shifting their relationship with gravity. They're, they're moving, they're sitting on the floor, they're standing up, they're walking, and they do this they're shifting their relationship to gravity 35 times a day. And you think about most of us, and we're 8 hours a day, we're pretty much sitting at the desk with an occasional time that we get up and go to the bathroom or something. And so this is another thing that that's movement is just another way to not just, like I said, get in touch with the body, but it just helps the body to be able to be healthy. Like you think about how our ancestors used to live, they were not sedentary. Like they were working in the fields, they were hunting and gathering, they were out, they were doing things, they were moving constantly. And that's really what the body expects and what it needs to be healthy. So the more that we can do that, that obviously isn't going to be what most of us are going to be able to do with the lifestyle that we have, with the jobs that we have, but we can still find ways to incorporate that more into our daily life, both breath and movement.
You raise all kinds of interesting topics. We could be here all day, but don't worry, we won't. We'll just have you back because I'm sitting here going like, wow. Hardest thing about having really interesting guests is that you get so wrapped up in what they're saying, you think, oh God, I got to ask another question here in a minute. Okay, so one of the figures I read recently is that 78% of all new jobs, careers are entrepreneurial, okay? Of that, 60% of the people starting their own business are female, all right? And almost 90% of those jobs are online, okay? So there's kind of a paradigm for you. And you talked a little bit about us sitting at our desks and not getting up and shifting. And since there's a lot of movement right now towards this internet-based business, however, coaching, consulting, whatever, can you talk to us a little bit about some other tips you might have?
Other tips for what in particular?
You talked about movement. You talked about the fact that we need to play, as I call it, play with the gravity and everything. If my career for the next 10 years is going to be based around my desk, what other practices do I need to integrate into my behavior?
Well, I mean, a couple of things, because I didn't really talk about specifics on those two. So just a couple more specific things that you can do. One of the things that I've started doing is I have an app that I downloaded from my computer. I'm on a Mac, so it's an app called Timeout. And what it does is every 15 minutes, it does like a mini break, like a really short break. It's about 10 seconds, and it kind of grays out it purples out my screen because I changed the color on it. And at that time, I get up and I do something, like I might stretch, or I might, just move a little bit, move my body, like remind myself that I have a body. And then I think I have it set for every 60 minutes, it does a 10-minute break. And so that's one thing you can do and it literally grays out my computer. I mean, I have to hit a button to say skip the break. Otherwise, I can't do anything on my computer. So you have to really consciously choose to, and a friend of mine said that button should be called I'm choosing to betray myself now when I hit the skip the break button. But it's a way to really kind of make myself choose to get up and do something. And you can use that same kind of thing. You could use a timer on your phone. that would be that you could then, remind you to take a breath or whatever it is. The other thing, and there are actually that's kind of the free option for incorporating these. There's also, I was just talking to one of my upcoming podcast guests yesterday, and she actually has a treadmill desk that she works at.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's expensive. It's like she said, it's like $1,200 to do that. But if you can, especially if you work from home, that might be a possibility, that you can get a treadmill desk and be working at that. And she also told me about a different option that's a little bit lower cost. And I didn't really understand what it is. I'm going to have to go and do some research on it, but it's some kind of like bicycle type thing. Like it's pedals that you put underneath your desk, and then you can be pedaling while you work. And it's just a way to get more movement, into your day. So those are a couple like just really specific kind of tips. But really it's, the other thing I would say is it's just like, be creative about it. Like this is one of the areas of your life that it's, we think of creativity as like, oh, I'm going to go do art, or I'm going to go do, music, or what, something like that. Or even maybe creativity in my business, like I'm going to create, a book or a program or something like that. But it's like, no, your whole life is an opportunity for creativity. So this is an area for creativity too. Like my self-care is an area for creativity. How creative can I get about incorporating more breathing and more movement into my life? And what does my body actually need? And really listening to what your body needs. Because that really, to me, is the key to a lot of, this whole topic that we're talking about today. Is it's like we're so out of touch with our body. And if you think about our body, the body has its own awareness, its own consciousness. It knows what it needs. And if we can really learn to be in communion with it, if we can really learn its language and how it's communicating with us, then our body will tell us. We don't have to impose something on it and be like, here, this is what I'm going to do. This is what we need to do. It's like your body will tell you what it needs at each moment. And so part of it is just like, as much as you can, start checking in with your body and just like, body, what movement do you need right now? Do you need some water right now? Would you like to eat right now? What would you like to eat right now? And just asking your body for everything that it...
A cheeseburger. No. Sorry, I'm always honest.
Well, then this is where, it's a continuum. Like you have to learn how to listen to the body, and that may actually be your mind talking about your body. Maybe your body does want a cheeseburger, but so yeah.
When you talk about listening to your body, okay, there's so much out there, and let me play devil's advocate with you for a minute, okay? And I agree with you. But, Julie, there's just so many hours in a day. And how do I go about, and you and I kind of talked about this earlier before the hangout, how do I go about coming up with starting to create that balance in my life? Because I'll be honest with you, you kind of, I agree with everything you say, but sometimes you sit back and you listen to folks like yourself talk about this journey, and you get overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. I'm not drinking what I'm supposed to drink. I'm not eating what I'm supposed to eat. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. Oh my gosh, take me home, Lord. Okay, it's all. How do I start?
That's a great question. Yeah, and I want to go back to what you said earlier, where you said you read that checklist and Reclaim Your Well-Being and got depressed, and I totally get it. And that's actually partly why I wrote that book, because I completely understand that. I mean, when you start looking, particularly if you're already at the point where you have a chronic illness, but even if you're not, even if you're just aware that you would like to take more power over your health and well-being, and you start to look out there and at the number of possibilities of things that you could do, it can feel very overwhelming. And I totally get it, and I've been there. And so what I basically tell people, and again, this isn't something, there's no prescription here. There's no do this first. It's really up to you. And the way I encourage people to look at it is there's kind of two paths that you can take. And I'll just start with the basic question that I think everybody can answer regardless is, what are 3 things that you could be doing right now to improve your health and well-being? And can't we all name 3 things? I mean, I can name 3 things I could be doing. I'm sure you can name 3 things. I'm sure anybody listening can name just a few things that you could be doing. Like, you already know this stuff. It's not like you have to go out and hunt for it. You know what you could be doing. And so the first thing is that's one place you could start, is just, you could start there. Just to, take one small step on one of those three things, or take one small step on all of those three things. So that's one place. The other thing is, you can use something like the tools that I've given, like the Reclaim Your Wellbeing checklist. And if you're going to use something like that, or if you just see all of these, if you kind of have your list of all of these possible things that you could do, I could change my diet, I could change what I drink, I could, clean out my toxic cleansers, I could be incorporating more self-care, and you have this whole list for yourself, then there's two different places you can look. One is what would be easiest. And easiest is a nice place to start. Like, what would just be such an easy change for you to make? And that's really nice because it sets up success. And if you can do something and you do it quickly and you see a result, it provides that motivation to keep going. The other place that you could start looking at that whole list is what would make the biggest impact in my life right now. And so if you look at what would make the biggest impact, maybe it would be like, oh, if I change my diet, that would probably make the biggest impact. And so you can take the steps along that direction. And so either one of those is kind of a good way to go. And again, it's just kind of up to which one feels right to you based on your personality, your kind of habits around making change. It's it's just choosing one of those paths so that you kind of set yourself up to be able to continue and to not get discouraged really easily, which a lot of us can do. It's like we try to start making a change and then it's like, oh, well, I didn't see a result, or maybe I didn't go fully into it. And so it's like, forget it. It's hopeless and I'm back to being powerless and, can't make change in my life. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. Perfect sense. Talk about the checklist a minute, okay? Because I enjoyed everything you wrote. That was really revealing, and to both my wife and myself. And I will tell you, you talked about something in there about drinking water, and you said, look, if you're a tea or a Diet Coke person, do the 2 day a week, I'm going to drink water, and ease off of it. Well, you'll be pleased to know today is a water day for me. I embrace that. Okay. Yeah. My wife, and she's wired different than I am in a lot of respects. My wife just said, no more coffee, no more soda. I'm just going to drink water. And she's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So she's 5 days into it. And I was a little concerned that, there might be some tension in the air, but there wasn't. I mean, she just said, I'm not bringing it into the house anymore. So, yeah. So I think, and we were talking last night and she said, I feel better. Okay. So when you put the checklist together, okay, how did you come up with all the stuff that's on there?
That's hard to answer, John. It's been years of, looking at this stuff for myself and making change for myself and knowing all of the different things that, that are actual choices that we can make, that really do impact our health and well-being. And I love that example that you just gave of the two different ways that you and your wife are going about it, because it's absolutely true. It's like, it really depends on kind of your personality and your style around things, how you can incorporate these kinds of changes into your life. But yeah, I mean, the checklist itself, and I actually, when I first appeared on Karen's Coffee and Coaching with Karen show, we actually talked about a couple of areas that aren't even on this checklist yet. So I actually need to kind of update this checklist with a few other areas. So it's something that I'm also constantly kind of recognizing some of the different areas that we have to impact our well-being. But yeah, it really just was, kind of a lot of my thinking about what can I change? What would I like to change? And then, putting that list together as a way to kind of give people some way into that whole conversation for themselves.
Okay. Let's talk about diet for a minute. Okay.
Okay.
Up until 6 months ago, eggs were going to kill you. Okay. Now all of a sudden somebody writes an article and publishes it in a journal that everybody goes, ooh, okay. Now eggs are okay for you, or so they say. So, Julie, how do you sift your way through all this stuff? I mean, how do you know? There's a real good quote. I'm not sure if it's on your website or in one of your books. It was from a doctor that says there's no such thing as junk food. There's junk and there's food. Okay. So how do I find the food?
Okay, well, there's a couple different, again, we could talk about this for an hour, well over an hour too. There's a couple different layers to that. So in terms of the junk and the food question, that is actually pretty easy. You know, if you're shopping in the supermarket, just skip the whole middle part of the supermarket, you know, shop the perimeter except for the bakery section. Like just, it's like meats, vegetables. It's like, that's real food. You know, if you think about, you know, Michael Pollan has a great book. I don't remember the name of it, Food Rules or something, you know, that's just all these really short things. But one of the things he says in it is, it's like, if your grandmother didn't eat it, or you know, sometimes these days it's more like if your great grandmother didn't eat it, then it's probably not real food. You know, all of the processed stuff that's in the middle of the supermarket, that's not actually real food. Now, some of that stuff is actually, you know, all right. But for the most part, if you really want to focus on eating real food, it's like shop the perimeter of the supermarket. So that's kind of one layer to the question. But the other is, you know, just in terms of what you were saying, like eggs are, you know, eggs are good, eggs are bad. There's so much, well, to start with, nutritional research is still at, I want to say, a fairly early stage. You know, so it's like anything that you read about, it's like there's so much, the body is so complex, and there's so much that we don't know about the body, about how food interacts with the body, about what's actually going on when you take something into your body and how it gets, you know, into your, how the nutrition, how it gets broken down and the nutrition gets out into all of the cells of your body. There's so much that isn't known about that. And so, yes, they're doing all this research, and it's easy to kind of read it and be like, okay, this is truth. Okay, eggs are bad for me. I'm not going to eat eggs. You know, and then, yeah, 2 minutes later, another study comes out that's like, eggs are great for you. You know, and they're both statistically significant results. And part of that is just because of, you know, one of the things that I learned in my health coaching program is the principle of bio-individuality. Like, we're all different. You know, the way, what happens in your body when you eat a carrot and what happens in my body when I eat a carrot aren't going to be the same things. Like, we have a different biochemistry. And so how the food that we take in is going to, you know, be different.
Do those things change as we age?
Absolutely. Yeah, what you eat, you know, how your body takes in a carrot when you're 20 is probably going to be different than how it takes in a carrot when you're 50. And, you know, again, that's just, you know, partly because of what you've already done and put into your body, but it's also just your biochemistry changes through, you know, throughout your life. So yeah, absolutely it changes. And
I can't eat tomatoes anymore. I can't. I have a skin reaction when I eat tomatoes, and this was kind of process of elimination. What's causing the problem? Because I would get rashy after eating something, and a very itchy rashy, and came down to the fact that it was tomatoes. And you know,
yeah.
I can have them a little bit, okay, but I can't eat a lot of tomatoes.
Yeah, and this call that I was on yesterday, I actually learned more about tomatoes than I knew before, because tomatoes are part of the nightshade family. And the nightshade family, you know, that poisonous nightshade, there's actually a whole slew of vegetable, you know, well, actually, she said they're sort of vegetable-like fruits, or fruit-like vegetables. So they're actually closer to a fruit. But anyway, they have these compounds in them that are actually kind of toxic in certain ways to the body. And tomatoes is an interesting one, because tomatoes, there's a compound in tomatoes that they're actually using or exploring using as an adjutant for vaccines, which means that it's something in tomatoes that actually helps something get into your body in a different way. And so, you know, that it's like anything that's that powerful, it can potentially cause problems in the body. Let's just say that. And there's other compounds in those vegetables that are, you know, that are difficult for the body. So that it doesn't surprise me to hear that, you know, when somebody says I'm having trouble with eggplant or tomatoes or peppers or anything like that, it's like, it's a nightshade. So it's, you know, it's possible that can cause a problem.
So here's what I hear you saying. Do your homework. Everybody's different. Okay.
Yeah, it's do your homework, and it's coming back to that thing of listening to your body. It's like what you did with the tomatoes. It's like, if something's going on that you don't understand and you think it might be related to food, then yeah, it's going through a process of kind of eliminate. I mean, there's also a possibility of going to a doctor and getting tests done to see, you know, you might have an allergy to something, and that might be revealed through some kind of test that you can take. But, you know, a free way to do it is basically to just start eliminating things from your diet. And, you know, especially if you have a sense, like you can keep a journal, you can track your diet, you can track your symptoms, and then you can kind of start to narrow it down and see what is it that I'm eating that might be causing this, and how do I, you know, can I cut it out and see if it makes a difference?
Okay. I go to my doctor and I tell my doctor that, you know, my knee hurts periodically. And she says to me, "You're just getting old, John." Okay. And you know, we've heard that a lot. My dad always used to say, it's just old age. Okay. In your opinion, is that valid?
No.
Okay.
You know, this is really tricky, because this starts to get into the area of beliefs. What do we believe? And taking on the beliefs of this reality. And that is very much a belief of this reality, right? It's like, oh, you get older, your body starts to fall apart, your skin starts to sag, your mind starts to go. It's like all of these, and it's, you know, we kind of watched it because our parents believed that. And so, you know, we kind of watch our parents' bodies and what happens to that. And that, again, kind of reinforces all of that belief. And, you know, your beliefs create your reality. And so if that's a belief that, and it's, you know, this is tricky because it's not easy to get those beliefs out of our heads, you know, out of our minds. Like they're really in there, and they're really in there, not just at a conscious level, but it's really subconscious levels as well. And that's kind of a different process to really get in and be able to shift those. But you know, it's kind of just up to, do you want to buy that as your reality? Do you want to really buy that your body's going to be falling apart as you get older? And do you want to buy that your doctor has all of the answers? You know, it's like, just because your doctor says it's just aging and there's nothing wrong with you, it's like, you talk to anybody that, well, not anybody, you talk to most people that have an autoimmune disease, and they will tell you that they went to 8 doctors, and all of those doctors told them that nothing was wrong with them, and they have an autoimmune disease. And it finally progressed to the point where some test, or some, you know, smarter doctor finally figured out what was wrong with them. And so if, you know, it's again one of those, it's like, do you want to buy what your doctor says? Do you want to buy that your body's going to fall apart as you age? Or do you want to make different choices around that, and, you know, either find out what's really going on? You know, if there's a pain in your knee, it probably has to do with inflammation. So, you know, inflammation is something that we very much have a lot to, you know, have some control over in terms of what we're putting into our body, how we're eating, how we're sleeping, things like that. You know, and as well as things like physical therapy to, you know, improve the function of the knee itself, or chiropractics to improve the alignment of the bones in our body. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we can do without kind of taking on those beliefs when we hear them. So it's part of it's just about being really conscious when you hear a belief and that you aren't sure that you want, you know, to be really conscious. Do I want to believe this or not? Is this what I want to buy, or do I want to make a different choice?
Here's what I hear you saying. I hear you saying balance, that everything works in harmony. And when everything works in harmony, that's when we're moving towards living what health is for us. Is that a pretty safe assessment on my part?
It is. What I really like about what you just said, John, is that you equated balance with harmony. Because a lot of times when people talk about balance, and I actually did a whole program a few years ago on balance, and called it the Balance Blueprint. And it was more about like the work-life balance issue. You know, but what I realized in looking at that whole thing was just like our concept of balance is really odd, because we tend to think of equality and having everything be equal and all of that. And what I came to realize for myself was that I really preferred that the definition of balance that's used in design, which is exactly that. It's harmony. It's like, how can everything in our life really be working in harmony? How can our body be working in harmony? You know, with an autoimmune disease, I mean, an autoimmune disease is the body is fighting against itself. You know, and a lot of inflammation, it's not exactly that, but, you know, there's something going on in the body that isn't, you know, that the body is kind of it's overactive in some way. And so it's like, well, how can we bring things back into harmony in the body? How can we bring things back into harmony between our body and our mind? How can we bring the whole body, mind, spirit, the whole system back into harmony? And so, yes, that's absolutely what everything is kind of geared towards with this is, how do we really, and that to me is really what healing is. When you talk about healing, whether it's healing from a physical illness or healing kind of in the bigger system, the body, mind, spirit system, what we're really moving towards is that a full harmony. And that even extends outside of us to harmony with, the world around us, the environment around us, because we are taking in things from the environment around us. So how can we also be in harmony with that?
Good stuff, for sure. One of the things you talk about is your inner change agent, okay, and activating that inner change agent. And I mean this very respectfully, okay. People read that and they're going to say, yeah, okay, just a bunch of psychological claptrap, okay. And I'll give you my opinion real quick, is that I think sometimes we say that because we're afraid to examine some of the things that are keeping us from that harmonious relationship. But you kind of identified some areas of those inner change agents. Could you share a couple of them with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that was out of the other ebook that you have, that
Right.
Successful Change. And with that, there's a lot of different ways that I talk about making change. This is a subject that absolutely fascinates me. I mean, at every level, from how do we make really small changes in our life, like these kinds of lifestyle changes, like changing our diet or drinking more water, all the way to how do we actually, like I said, kind of be in full harmony with the universe and ourselves, and really become who we fully, truly are as beings and living in this world. And so all levels of that absolutely fascinate me. And I've done a lot of reading and research on it. And so there's a bunch of different ways that I talk about it. And that book was kind of, I wrote it just as a sort of fun way to try to, get these ideas out there a little bit more. And I was thinking of it archetypally. So it's like you think of archetypes, these sort of energies that we can take on that help us live something out in the world. And so some of these kind of archetypes, I just, named them interchange agents. Some of the archetypes around change can be like the scientist or the explorer or the artist. And it's like when you can embody this sort of energy of a scientist when you're making a change. So for example, you can kind of define clearly, like a scientist defines clearly the problem that they're going to work on. And then they, create a plan for how they're going to work on it. And then they do an experiment, and then they track the results. And you can do that around change. Like you can embody that kind of scientist energy around making a change. Like, okay, I'm going to change, I'm going to see if eating tomatoes is really the problem with my, skin issue here. And so you design the plan. I'm going to take tomatoes out. And then you track the results. Okay, does my skin rash go away? And I'm going to eat a tomato and see if it comes back. That's like this kind of taking on this interchange agent of a scientist, versus something more like, I think one of the ones I talk about is like a social butterfly, and that's this kind of energy you can take on where, one of the key things with change is just to have support around doing it from other people and to have accountability. And so with, taking on this interchange agent of being a social butterfly, you can take on this energy that really allows you to be in communication with other people in a way that supports you to make the change, whatever the change is that you want to be making. Because studies actually show that the more support you get in different ways, the more likely you are to actually reach a goal that you want to reach. So those are just a couple of them. The explorer, just being able to really bring that kind of adventurous energy, that curiosity that we all had as kids and hopefully still have, to whatever the change is, rather than seeing it as like, oh God, this is this thing that I've got to do and, see if it'll work. It's like, no, like how much fun can I have? How much curiosity, like what's really going on here? And how can I bring that energy of this exploration and adventure to making the change that I want to make? So those are just a couple of them. I think I had 7 or something. I don't remember.
We're almost out of time, believe it or not. I looked down at the clock and thought, we're almost out of time. I want to give you a few minutes to talk about your podcast, because you do it on a regular basis. And do you want to talk with us a little bit about the philosophy behind it, what you do, type of guests you have?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the podcast is called Autoimmune Adventures, and It's so basically I started it because, you know, I was obviously have an autoimmune disease. And so I'm interested in continuing to learn myself. I'm continuing to dive into, you know, kind of the whole topic. The philosophy behind it is really, you know, so I've talked a little bit about kind of my journey with illness and autoimmunity. And one of the things that, you know, I've kind of shifted for myself is this idea that if something's going on in your body, it's something that's wrong with you. It's something that has to be fixed. It's something that's bad, you know, and really shifting, like, how can we see something, how can we see what's going on in our body as a wrongness and shift it to be a rightness? So that's a lot of what kind of we cover on the podcast, and I've covered with guests, is it's like, what's really going on here that you can take, that you can learn from, that you can grow from, and it's living into that greater healing that I talked about. So, you know, I differentiate between cure and healing. It's like a cure means you cure the disease, but you can cure a disease without healing. You know, healing is really growing more whole. I mean, that's the definition behind to heal, is to grow more whole. And so if you think about growing more whole as a being, like as body, mind, spirit, you know, that's really the goal to me, and that's kind of the point behind the podcast, is how do we live into that journey, that healing journey. And so I do a couple different types of episodes. I have my own episodes where I cover some topic that I'm interested in, and a lot of it has been focused on that healing journey. And then I bring a lot of guests on, and it's not always focused on autoimmunity. So even if you have another chronic illness, or even sometimes if you don't even have a chronic illness at all, you can get benefit out of these episodes. We've talked about self-compassion. We've talked about internal conflict. Did a great episode recently on creating communion with the body. And then there's a bunch of stuff on specifically on like aspects of diet. We I had a great guest on recently on toxins, like, you know, toxins and autoimmunity. So yeah, that's kind of the podcast, and I'm releasing episodes every couple of weeks at this point. So it's kind of an ongoing process, and it's been really fun. It's, you know, talking to a lot of great guests. And
if we want to get a schedule for that or know when it's happening, we can find that on your website.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the website for that is aiadventures.com, and it's also up on iTunes. So you can definitely go to iTunes, Autoimmune Adventures, and Stitcher Radio, and all the places you can find podcasts. aiadventures.com, and if you get on the list there, you get the Reclaim Your Wellbeing gift, as well as a bunch of other gifts from guests. Yeah. And then, you know, you'll also find out when new episodes come out.
Yeah. I'll post all that in the event page once the hangout's over, so people watching later and people watching now can take advantage of it. Some good stuff. And, you know, a lot of times I have people say to me, well, autoimmune disease I don't know anybody that has that, and I don't have that. But, you know, there's so much you can learn just from the whole situation.
Well, there's that. And yes, absolutely, especially because one of the lessons really from autoimmunity, I think, is that almost everybody I've talked to who has an autoimmune disease, they had something going on in their body. They had kind of symptoms or something they noticed in their body earlier than they got diagnosed. So that's one. It's like taking care of your health. There's the genes for autoimmunity are fairly widespread in the population. And so there's a lot of people out there who actually have a predisposition genetically to autoimmunity. And then all of the rest, the development of autoimmune disease, is based on environment. So that's based on everything from your thoughts to what you're putting in your body to, you know, everything they're using around your body, you know, your relationships, everything. And so that's one takeaway from it, is just like, don't let yourself get to that point if you happen to have autoimmune disease. And the second thing I would say to what response to what you just said, is actually that you'd be surprised. You probably do know somebody. There's over 130 recognized autoimmune diseases now. According to the American Autoimmune Related Disease Association, 50 million people in the United States have an autoimmune disease. And yet only about 20% of people can actually name an autoimmune disease. So there's sort of the recognized ones like multiple sclerosis or lupus, but there's 130 diseases. So you probably do know somebody, and in fact, somebody in your own family could have an autoimmune disease. So yeah, that's the other piece of it.
Okay. Julie, thank you. This was real enlightening to me, and like I said, the difficult part for me is I was listening to you more than I was taking care of some of my hosting duties. I really appreciate you being with us today. Next week, I'm going where I've never gone before. We're going to have a guest, and I have to bring my little cheat card here, Miss Tina Falk. And Tina is a feng shui specialist. Now, as brilliant as I am, I thought feng shui was an appetizer on an Oriental menu, okay? And I spent some time with Tina last week talking, and just like the time I spent with Julie preparing for this hangout, wow, my eyes were really opened as to feng shui just isn't moving grandpa's comfortable chair by the window. Okay. There's a lot of different things that go into it. So I'm looking forward to that. The event page will go up tomorrow or Monday. And Julie, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, John, for having me on today. It's been really fun, and I really appreciate all your questions.
Okie dokie. So for Julie and for myself, thank you so much. And we're glad you were able to be here. And I'm going to stop the broadcast now if Google will let me, because we have run into a glitch. Everybody just stay where you're at. There we go. Say goodbye, Julie.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.